Welcome to the Dolby Music Community Sessions. I'm Ben Givarz with the Music Partnerships team at Dolby Laboratories based in Los Angeles. And this is a special session with a great lineup of guests dedicated to progressive workflows to give you creative options and flexibility for creating in Dolby Atmos, monitoring and mixing both stereo and Atmos at the same time, and using the Stereo Direct feature of the Dolby Atmos Renderer. So as we've shared in previous sessions, Stereo Direct is a feature within the Dolby Atmos Renderer, which is a separate re-render and monitoring layout and allows you to create a separate stereo deliverable directly from your Dolby Atmos mix. So this is not a fold down because the output is created directly from your Dolby Atmos mix. It's a separate re-render, which can allow you to start with higher resolution assets from the beginning and hopefully give you more flexibility in your workflow and planning. So we'll also be joined by our friend Robin Reumers, mix and mastering engineer and director of education for Abbey Road Institute and Miami Art House, to share how he's using low latency production techniques to create original music in Dolby Atmos using Pro Tools, and how he uses Stereo Direct to derive new stereo re-renders of his Dolby Atmos mixes. It's great stuff as always with Robin, so stay tuned for that conversation with Robin and Greg Stryke Chin coming up. We also have a great conversation with engineer Matt Boudreau from Working Class Audio, who joins the community sessions for the first time. And he shares a bit about the progressive workflows he's doing in Dolby Atmos that allow him to mix and monitor both stereo and Atmos at the same time, monitor his stereo, binaural, and his 5.1 loudness profile all at the same session. So we're stoked to have Matt joining and representing San Francisco and the Bay Area. We'll also sit down for a few minutes with Loic Maestracci, the Music Expo San Francisco founder, which is a series of annual live events for music creators that features masterclasses, workshops, panels, and discussions with the industry's leading speakers. He's also the chair of the Audio Engineering Society's San Francisco section. And this year's Music Expo SF is coming up on Saturday, November 9th, and will feature a talk track dedicated to immersive audio in Dolby Atmos, taking you all the way from creating original music all the way through to mastering, and will feature presentations from Dolby Institute and also auto and home theater demos, plus a ton more. Stay tuned for that, and we'll tell you how to get involved. As always, Dolby's Greg Stryke Chin is back with his pro tips, and this time he debuts part one of a new multi-part series on creating an original song in Dolby Atmos from the start. So this is super cool stuff to get you going and creating in Atmos and employing some progressive workflows. So don't miss that with Greg coming right up, and be sure to add your questions in the question tab. Before we jump into our discussions, be sure to scan the QR code on screen now to opt into the Dolby Creators mailing list, which will keep you up to date with the latest Dolby Atmos tools, including downloads for the Dolby Atmos Renderer and album assembler, plus info on events happening around Dolby Atmos music. This will also lead you to the Pro site, where you can access the knowledge base, FAQs, user forums, quick start and deep dive videos, plus the Dolby Music Essentials course from Dolby Institute, available in 5 languages and always completely free. All right, this is a super packed session with tons of conversations. Please add your questions for Robin, Matt, and Greg, and we'll be back to answer those shortly. Enjoy. All right, excited to welcome to the Music Community Sessions, Loic Maestracci. Loic's the founder of the Music Expo San Francisco, a series of annual live events for music creators that features masterclasses, workshops, and panels with the industry's leading speakers. He's also chair of the Audio Engineering Society San Francisco chapter. Loic, welcome. It's great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Great to see you, Ben, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, anytime. So we are coming up quickly on this year's Music Expo, which is taking place on November 8th at Music City, San Francisco, and you're celebrating the 10th year of the event. So congratulations on that. And for this year's event, you're really focusing on Dolby Atmos and immersive music creation and mixing. Can you share a little bit of background of the Expo and sort of how you got to where you are today, and why now it was important to focus on immersive music?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we started, as you said, we started 10 years ago here in San Francisco. I mean, the premise at the beginning was to create a music conference for musicians, by musicians, and usually in a music venue. Really, the aim is to empower music creators to live from their art. Main theme that people are concerned in terms of technology and immersive audio and Dolby Atmos is clearly a major theme. And this is why, I mean, our entire technology track is focused on Dolby Atmos.
It's really exciting. So take us through the setup of the event for the day. I mean, you have a lot of amazing partners, to name just a few, such as Focusrite, Novation, Adam, Neumann, Cali Audio, and many guests from the industry, people like Michael Romanowski, Matt Boudreau, Piper Payne. Can you share a little bit about, the space itself and what people will be experiencing throughout the day and kind of the setup of the event?
We decided to go to Music City, which I think you're familiar, which is this rehearsal space. There's about 20 rehearsal spaces. There's small venues and there's a big auditorium. And really, we try to have to format the event to fit the space. So the setup's going to be the following. There's going to be 3 or 4 rooms reserved for masterclasses, workshops, and panels that will be happening all day long. And then the 20 rehearsal rooms will be reserved for exhibitors and sponsors for them to run demos and be able to present their products. So that's the setup. And yeah, as you mentioned, some of the people who are speaking, idea that they would be running the presentations, they would be running the master classes and the workshops, they would be participating to panels. And I'm sure we can go more in details into it.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting. Those are some fantastic partners and partners that we work closely with as well. So Dolby Institute is an educational partner, if you will, for Music Expo, and Dolby Institute's John Scanlon and Brandon Nales will be hosting hands-on masterclasses that are focused on, people who want to get started in Dolby Atmos, both in Avid Pro Tools and also in Apple Logic Pro. And you can sign up for those shortly at your site. John and I will also share an overview of the Dolby Atmos music ecosystem in the morning with some playback examples in the Neumann room. We'll also have the Mercedes-Benz S-Class on site, enabled for Dolby Atmos, that guests can check out and even check out translation from the studio to the car. So it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of things for people to experience, both on the educational front and the networking front. What are some of the other kind of exciting pieces, either around the event or as part of the event, that you want to mention that you think people would be excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about the rest, but I really want to zero in on this immersive track. The way we built the track, it was kind of almost an end-to-end programming, So really, John and yourself will be kind of kicking things off by kind of explaining Atmos in general. But then what we're going to do is we're going to have a workshop around production specifically for immersive and try to think from a production perspective and from a creative perspective, how you approach this new format. Second, we're going to have a mixing session by Matt Boudreau. Someone who's been specialized in Atmos mixing for years now, and now it's going to walk through, make his mixing process and setup. And then we're going to go with Michael, who's going to go over mastering and delivering files. And then we cannot announce yet, but I'm very excited about the listening session, and that's how we're going to close this. In parallel, as you mentioned, John and Nathan are going to have some hands-on get started on Pro Tools and the Logic Pro. So that's going to be super cool, where just a few people can attend and really have their hand held to learn about the setup. And I have to announce something. Avid is an official partner of Music Expo this year. So really what we're trying to do is bring all the best from the ecosystem all together. So like that, there's the best presentation and the best support. So people, really start from the best foot forward. And then the other talks, on the creative side, we're going to go over songwriting. We're going to go over voice coaching, voice harmonization. We're going to even talk about the art of synthesizers. We're going to talk about, have some workflow, conversation, production workflow, conversation and workshop. We're going to even have a masterclass on gaming, because it's a good space, especially here in the Bay Area. And we're going to have workshop on the business side. We're going to talk about sync. We're going to talk about some movie sync, commercial sync. We're going to talk about AI and how it's impacting music creation, but also music promotion. We're going to talk about digital marketing, because things have changed a lot. So really good, really good stuff.
That's all fantastic. This sounds like a really fantastic day full of a lot of resources, but also networking as well. If people want to learn more and get involved, how should they do that?
They should definitely go to musicexpo.co. So that's musicexpo.co. And actually, you mentioned number 8. Yes, we start the event number 8 with a pre-event at High Street Studio. It's an exclusive event where we're going to have Mark Needham and John Culiberti share sessions that they've recorded years ago at High Street Studio. So I'm really excited because it's a great way to kick things off. And then the entire conference is the Saturday the next day on November 9th at Music City.
I love it, man. I think you're doing a fantastic job to put together everything from creation all the way through to QC and mastering and delivery and giving your attendees the entire experience. So, Loic, well done. It's always great to see you and looking forward to it.
Ben, thank you and the team for supporting the event since day one, because it's shaping how it is today thanks to your support. And I look forward to being with you there.
All right, excited to welcome to the Music Community Sessions mix engineer Matt Boudreau of Working Class Audio. Matt, always good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, great to see you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. So I love your mission statement of navigating the world of recording with a working class perspective. And you are certainly doing that in a lot of ways through your work in the community to provide resources, including what you've got at your site and your podcast. And you're also sharing technical demonstrations for mixing, and you're present at industry events. Like, how do you draw on your experience as a mixer, your vast experience, to kind of put all these things together? And what are you looking to achieve with all of your fantastic efforts?
I just follow what entertains me, what lights my brain on fire, what excites me about sharing knowledge, learning new things. I'm a sponge, but I also like to share knowledge as well.
Well, you've done that through a really great technical demonstration video on your site where you're sharing your workflow for mixing in both stereo and Dolby Atmos at the same time. It's a really cool session, and thank you for sharing it, where you go through session setup and your actual mix and post mixing and QC. And it looks like it gives you a lot of flexibility. So I'll ask you to get into it a little bit further, and maybe you can describe the setup at your studio there. But essentially, you've created this 916 bus system with your 916 object bed, where really everything's going to objects except the LFE, right? And then you've set up your 2.0 down mix monitor and your print pass-through and your binaural monitor and your 5.1 loudness monitoring. It's a really cool workflow that you've set up. Can you share a little bit about your setup there and what you were kind of looking to achieve with this demonstration?
Truthfully, the demonstration came as a result of somebody on LinkedIn sent me a message and said, "Hey, I hear you talk on your show about mixing in stereo and Atmos. Could you possibly explain that to me?" And I sat back and I was like, well, am I going to take the time to explain it to this one person, or should I just make a video and share it with as many people as possible?
Yeah, and you laid it out really nicely. Like I mentioned, you kind of get into your setup, you share a bit of your monitoring and your workflow, and you even get into some LFE filtering with multi-mono plugins, which was cool, and sharing how you AB and how you print, and QCing with the album assembler and all of these things. So you developed the system out of a conversation, but what has it solved for you, and what's been the reaction to it? Is it something that you actually see yourself using as you go forward?
In terms of solving problems, my biggest problem that I think I laid out in the video is that, I mostly work in the indie world. Occasionally we'll work with major artists, but in the indie world, the idea of having to pay for a stereo mix independent of an Atmos mix, that's a little bit of an issue for some people. It was also just a logistical pain for me to, okay, I'm going to do a stereo mix, I'm going to print the stems, and now I'm going to do the Atmos mix. It was just too much distraction from, seizing the moment with the music. So, and I know that sounds mildly cliche, but really when you're doing a mix, you're excited about it. But if you have to stop and do some kind of chore, like making stems to get to the next artistic pit stop, I don't know, I find it just kind of cumbersome. So this method solves that problem. It puts both mixes in play right at the same time. It allows to create continuity between the stereo and the Atmos so that there's not such a disparity between the two. And it all came as a light bulb moment when I was working with my friend and fellow engineer, Chris Dugan. We were working on a Green Day Atmos mix for the theme song for the Bill Maher Real Time with Bill Maher show. And HBO wanted all these delivery things, all these delivery formats. And so I was setting up my Grace monitor controller for that. And at some point I was like, well, wait a minute. we could actually do this in the whole same project. The project obviously carried great importance, and my experience with Atmos at that point, yes, it was established, but I still was a little nervous about things. So I was a little conservative about it. And I was like, well, let's just do what we need to do and get through this project. And then on another project down the line, I'll test these theories. So I did a jazz record with some high school kids that came out amazing. Like when people hear it, number one, they don't sound like high school kids. They sound like total pros. So that helps. But it gave me an opportunity on that project to test the waters with this. Can I mix in stereo and Atmos at the same time? And what I had experienced on that project, I just now put into practice with every project that I do. So when someone hires me to mix, they're going to get both.
Yep. And again, I go back to the word flexibility, but that's really what it looked like it did for you, was gave you a lot of flexibility, in particular, monitoring the different re-renders and down mixes. So I think it's a fantastic setup. Can you share a little bit about your studio there, your home studio? Sure.
About 3 years ago, I got the Atmos bug, and I'm in my house. I am in what used to be my kids' playroom when they were little, and I took over, and they still give me grief about that to this day, even though they're teenagers. They always say, I want my playroom back. But I took this room. It's a mid-century modern house, so it's got a funny ceiling angle. And this room I'm in must have been an add-on at some point, because the walls, none of them are parallel, which played into my studio desires. So yeah, I set up shop in here many, many years ago. And after closing down a studio that I had in San Francisco, and moved into here. And then when Atmos came around, I pared down all the furniture that I had in the room. I got one of these DAW carts. So I just don't have racks and racks of gear around me. I have, the cart with the monitor controller, the speakers. I've got a 714 PMC system with a Cali Audio LFE. So with this 714 system, it allows me to mix and be competitive in the world of Atmos. It was tuned by Jonathan Lessner from Dolby, and he did a fantastic job. And yeah, there's not much more to say. I put it in, I set it up, I got to work.
It goes from being the kids' playroom to dad's playroom.
That's right.
Nice. So let's talk a little, and a shout out to Jonathan Lessner, of course, who is a fantastic room tuner. Let's talk a little about your podcast quickly. Working Class Audio Podcast. You've been doing this for 10 plus years now, with over 500 episodes. That's impressive, man. Congrats on that. What's the basis of the podcast? Where can people check it out, and what should they expect?
I think the starting point would be workingclassaudio.com. You can obviously search it on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and slowly starting to make inroads into YouTube with it as well. But the show started as a result of my mishandling and failures at running a recording studio over 10 years ago. And it was an opportunity for me to come up with an excuse to talk to friends and peers about how they survive in the world of audio. So it gives me this license to talk to a lot of very, very famous people, and some not so famous, and get to the heart of what makes them tick, the decision-making process. We talk about money. We talk about the business of audio. We really don't talk about gear. The point is to talk about, the lifestyle, what this world presents to us as audio professionals.
And really, you've done a fine job at it. I like how you sort of go through exploring these people's backgrounds, and it may not always, stay aligned on the path of the music industry. It's kind of about their lives and how they've, come to where they are today. And there's certainly a lot of different paths that people can take to do that. And I like the way that you help craft that story along with them. So it's great stuff, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
You're also going to be at Music Expo SF, which is in San Francisco, coming up November 8th and 9th. Can you share a little bit about what you'll be doing there? And looking forward to seeing you as well there.
Yeah, I'm going to be digging into a mix that hasn't been released. I don't know if it will be released or not, because it was just kind of an experiment. Joe Begale, who is Otis McDonald, produced some 90s covers with the artist Aloe Black. So Joe spent the day with me just kind of getting the lay of the land with Atmos. I invited him over. We had coffee, we had lunch, and then we just, I play him stuff and I examine how it's put together. And I do that a lot for a lot of other engineers and artists who like to come over for a little field trip to my place. And he said, well, look, I've got these tracks for Aloe that he did of Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun. Why don't you do a mix and let's hear it? And, we'll send it to Aloe, and, it'll be an interesting perspective to hear it in this format. So I talked to Joe and he gave me clearance to, get into the mix at Music Expo. So we're going to examine how that's put together and maybe go into a bit of my whole 916, stereo and Atmos combo mixing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for everything that you do to educate people and provide resources out in the community, and to also push forward the workflows around Dolby Atmos. And we'll make sure to link to your videos and your site here as well. And you're going to stick around for Q&A at the end as well?
Absolutely.
All right. Happy to hand it over to Dolby's Greg Stryke Chin and our friend, engineer and director of education at Abbey Road Institute in Miami, Mr. Robin Reumers. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be here. Robin, so wonderful to have you. Thanks for joining us. I should note that we're literally just down the street from each other. We're both here in Miami, literally just blocks away from each other. But we're really super happy to have you. I should say welcome, or rather welcome back. You've been a guest on the Dolby Atmos Music Community Sessions before, and we were really honored and privileged to have you here with us today. So you do a lot of things, and we're going to get right into it in just a second. But just for some of our, we've had some newer audience joining us over the past few months and a couple of years. So it's always great for folks to get to know our guests. So I figure if you could just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump right into it.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you both for Greg and Ben for having me here. It's always great to talk about immersive audio and all the fun stuff that we can do these days. So my background, I started off in the mastering field. I was very fortunate to have Bob Katz as my mentor when I started my career, back when I was 19. After working with Bob, I moved to Belgium. I worked there in a recording studio, recording facility. And then back in 2015, I kind of decided to do two things. One is to build my own studio in Amsterdam and there create the Abbey Road Institute in Amsterdam, and as well build a plugin company called Leapwing Audio. So I kind of did both at that time, did that for 4 years. And then back in 2020, I decided to move to Miami, some better weather. And yeah, still doing Leapwing, still developing plugins, but also doing a lot as engineer, like mixing, Stereo-Atmos, also recording, and as well, of course, with Abbey Road Institute, teaching with the students. So I love that combination. For me, the combination of the three things, the recording, mixing, like whatever happens on that side, with plugin development and with teaching, I think for me it's the perfect combination.
So you're joining us today. You're in your room at the Abbey Road Institute at Art House, and we're going to talk a little bit about your workflow as it pertains to creating music in Atmos, not just mixing it, which is obviously a huge thing, and this is kind of how most people understand working in Dolby Atmos. But with the iteration that we've been doing in the tool set, there's a lot now that's available to you, the creator. And so you've been delivering both stereo and Atmos mixes, and you're creating an Atmos. So what I'd love to do is just jump right in, and love to start with having you walk us through the idea and your workflow in terms of creation in Atmos as it pertains to low latency, monitoring and recording, and then we'll kind of move down to the rest of it. But we'll start right here with low latency and monitoring and recording.
Yeah, awesome. So I created this little presentation to kind of do a screenshot for those who are not familiar yet with how to set it up, because I mean this is all great, but it's all pretty, for us it's been pretty recent, I would say, maybe what is it, less than a year now, I think, that it was really possible. Because the original workflow that we were all used to was that we had Pro Tools to send panning data and the Atmos stream, or like the objects, and send that to the renderer, and that's where then the processing happened. And so with that, with both, and the way we had our setup with the HDX, there was just latency, because you need the buffers to send in between. So it wasn't really possible for us to play like real-time piano or to record something. So as a production workflow, it was definitely more challenging, because we needed to like switch back and forth. But fortunately now, with like the latest versions of Pro Tools, it is possible to have Pro Tools in low latency and do object panning and everything in real time. So yeah, for those who you see the presentation, the fact that you can now have any track that you're recording, and you can send panning data to the internal renderer, and then send it, like in this example, you can see it's only 32 samples of latency to the output, is pretty amazing. It's pretty incredible that we're able to do that now. So that really changed our workflow, I think, in terms of, the possibilities, and really being able to think and figure it out on the spot, instead of having to think, trying to record, then seeing how it works in immersive. So it's been great.
Beautiful. I'll just quickly also mention, so in terms of being able to work in low latency for modern recording in your DAW, it's specifically with Pro Tools. So these are all leveraging the internal rendering for the associated DAWs. So with Pro Tools, as you're showing here, Robin, 32 samples. If you're working natively, if you are working at HDX, it's going to be 64 milliseconds is the lowest buffer. And then if you're working in another DAW that has internal rendering, so specifically Apple Logic Pro, Persona Studio One, Resolve Blackmagic, these all also feature low latency down to 32 milliseconds as well. So just wanted to make sure I point that out. And that's awesome. Thank you for walking us through that, Robin. So taking us, now obviously I can see here on your slide, I see that you've already got you're showing the internal renderer setup page, and you've got an object assigned to a synth. And that's exactly what I'm showing here today as well, is actually creating that music. So, using low latency, and I'm going to be using some drum machines and synths. So really perfect example. So now if we kind of move throughout that, and then, you're actually doing all this great work, I'm sure there's a lot of freedom that you feel as an engineer, producer, and I'm certainly with the artist. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that feels like? Being able to really capture that stuff, monitor that stuff, and already have it assigned to objects, maybe even having stuff move around via automation. What does that feel like?
I mean, it's a great question. I must say, full transparency, I'm less of a creator. For example, my strength is definitely on the engineering side. So I love figuring things out for the musicians here. So for example, Julio and Natalia and Danny, they are the ones really playing the piano. I'm not a great musician, but it's been fun, especially seeing their reactions and seeing the possibilities from their side. It's been great. It's it opens up a whole new possibilities. And as well, when artists are in the studio, I think it really opens their minds to new possibilities, because before, when you go to a writing session, for example, it also has become, I think, trend wise, that this is a bad thing to say, but maybe a bit formulaic, as in people know they go to a writing session, there's 3 or 4 people in the room, they start writing the song. But I think the fact that this opens up new possibilities makes them more creative as well. It gives them new ideas, things they haven't thought of. So I think as an industry, it's definitely great, because it gives new opportunities.
So let's go ahead and fast forward. So, let's focus on the idea of deriving your stereo mix, from an Atmos mix or Atmos master. You're doing the Atmos mix first. How do you go about deriving the stereo mix from that? Walk us through that.
Well, I think there's definitely different scenarios, and I think here in the studio as well, we're very fortunate that we're working on different workflows. Like every artist will have a different workflow, as in, some projects we're producing we're writing, producing in house. Some we're maybe only producing in house. Some we're producing, mixing in house. Some we're only mixing. We get songs to mix. So I really think when we start a project, we try to really figure out, okay, what's the right workflow for this project. And of course, it gets easier when we do the whole trajectory and we do everything. Otherwise, we just try to discuss and have talks with the rest of the people, that are part of the production team of the album or of the song. But in case we have like total freedom, it's definitely great to be able to go, as you said, early into Atmos, writing, producing, and then being able to have everything set up, with a great template to where you can do it, like your processing in groups and how everything works or sounds like you want to. And then the great thing, I guess, we should talk about now is the ability to do the stereo direct, the direct render. Maybe to start, the idea is that the original, the way the regular fold down, I call it here, but like the way it traditionally the stereo was derived, was that it would kind of, I guess, like you could think of it like you start from the big box and you kind of go down till you get to a smaller box, in this case stereo. So and especially going from like 5.1 or 7.1 5.1 to stereo, I think that's where you could have some things that you might not want. And I mean, I think the traditional example would be that if you have something panned in the back and you're moving it forward, that your level goes up and goes down in the stereo. I think that's the biggest downside or things that we didn't want, which the good thing is that it's now possible. So as you can see in the slide that I put here, that if you were to have on the left top, if you were to have an object in the left front, it would come in at -20. Then if you would put it halfway, it would be at like -18. But then if you would put it all the way in the back, it would be at -23. And then in the top, it would also be -20. So there's, almost 5 dB difference in the stereo fold down, in the regular stereo fold down, between the position of the objects. The amazing thing is that in the direct stereo render now, everything stays at -20, which is amazing, because I think for a lot of us, when we work with a lot of like stereo stems or stereo buses that we like to work with, we like to create like a stereo sound, and we place those tracks that we like in the stereo field, that when it gets folded down, that the level doesn't go up and down, and you need to play with the trim settings and try to get as close as possible. The fact that like I don't even need to think about that anymore is amazing, because it kind of takes away that aspect of like, okay, we're safe. Like I can put it anywhere. I don't need to worry how it falls down. So for me, it's been amazing to be able to do that now.
I think that's a great way to kind of explain it and show it. When I'm going to ask you about your confidence in delivering using Stereo Direct in a second, but really kind of showing it this way visually really drives the point home, especially when you think about previously how you would be able to derive that. It was a fold down, it was a pass through, and it had to pass through 5.1 to get to the 2.0 here. And as you're showing it, and I just want to hammer that home, that it's super important to show. And I think this is probably the most important piece of a 2.0 stereo direct render, is the fact that it is a separate re-render. It's not passing through anything else. And it really is maintaining the integrity in terms of what's happening sonically from a decibel level, from a loudness level. If those objects or those pieces of audio happen to be being placed in different areas, you're able to retain the exact integrity of the volume, as it were. So I think how you showed that was perfect. Anything else you wanted to talk to us about in terms of how you work? I mean, you're deriving stereo, and I'm assuming that you're using the direct render, 2.0 direct render in the Dolby Atmos renderer. Talk to us a little bit about that, and talk to us a little bit about your confidence in it at the end of the day.
I feel somehow we're still pretty early stages of being like knowing what we're doing. I feel like I talk to many mixers, and I mean, everybody is still trying to figure it out, which is great because I feel like we should always be figuring things out, and we should never be confident in like, oh, this is how it's done. And I feel that's a great space to be, because we're learning things every day. But what I feel is important, and it's really great that it's so easy to do, and I'm going to go back to the presentation, is the ability, and I showed both sides. I showed on the right, I showed how you can do it in Pro Tools, and on the left in the renderer, depending on which setup you prefer, is the fact that you can switch monitoring very quickly. Like you can go from whatever your room setup is, whether it's a 9.1.4 or 9.1.6, and then all the way down to now the stereo direct. And I do feel it's very important to be able to see how things fall down. And as you said, like now with the stereo direct, every time you do a new mix, like we start to get more confidence in how it falls down and how we know it will translate. So I love that. I love that it's like a new possibility, and the fact that everybody is like learning all the time. But I do feel it's important to always check and to always use that option, because it's so easy just to drop down. Okay, how does it sound at 5.1? I mean, it sounds very simple of it's in just a drop down, but if you think about how we used to have to do, what we used to have to do to switch between being able to listen to a 5.1 to a stereo to anything else, we would need a whole matrix, and we need a lot of things. And the fact that now you can just switch and listen, I think is amazing. So yeah, I mean, I feel confident, but I still, of course, love to check and see what happens. And I do feel it's an important part of the step. We should never just like let it do whatever it does. And
yeah, confidence doesn't mean that you don't still QC correctly.
Exactly.
And make sure that you're listening back to the final results. You know, of course, we want to make sure that is still happening. You know, we still want to make sure that people are paying close attention to all of the deliverables that need to happen, right? So
yeah, absolutely. But as more time goes on, the more confident we get in how it translates, and the more, yeah, we can do things intuitively. But it's, yeah, such a great time to be able to do all these things.
So Robin, thank you for all of that. I mean, I think you've laid it out so beautifully, so kind of perfect for, you know, so that anyone can really understand, you know, what this process is on both sides. So I really appreciate that. And just, you know, one last one I wanted to ask you. Again, you do so many things. You're, you know, an engineer, producer. My dog wants to know the answer to this question. So you're a plugin developer, educator. You're doing all of these things. Like, how do you balance that all? The world needs to know.
The good thing is I don't have much of a life, so that's I think that's the only answer to this. But I mean, in truth, I love it. I love the combination, because I feel like everything affects. Like, I feel teaching is such a great thing, because every time I prepare my class in the morning, I'm learning again, and I need to really understand it before I can teach it. So it's such a great thing to get better at things. And the same for the plugins. I see my students struggling with something, or like they don't know how this works. Okay, let's see if we can make a tool that works better. And the other way around as well. Of course, everything that we do, like professionally, the mixes we do, we love to involve the students. We love to show them, they get better, but they also inspire us. I think it works both ways. Like a lot of, especially like the young students, they have such creative ways to do things these days that, I mean, we're all learning from this all the time. So for me, it's the perfect combination, the perfect balance to do these three things. I love it. I am very busy. I don't have weekends. I don't have holidays, but I enjoy it.
Well, everything feeds everything else in terms of this whole creative space. We really appreciate you, Robin. You know, we want you to have a life. We value and we're so grateful to you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this with us. And with that, I will now turn it back over to my good friend, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And Robin, yes, thank you so much for sharing all of this, man. Like your knowledge, your wisdom, your passion for what you do is really infectious, and we just really appreciate it. And I love, you know, specifically everything you said, but your take on kind of low latency production and recording, hopefully opening up new creative outlets and kind of breaking that formulaic mold of creation and bringing it into a new dimension. I personally think that's kind of one of the most exciting things happening, and I think it will give our viewers and the people that you interact with in the creative community and your students something new to think about, which is really exciting. All right, Greg Stryke Chin is here with his pro tips. What's up, Greg?
What's happening, Ben? Super stoked for today.
Me too, man. This is exciting. So you are debuting part 1 in a new multi-part series that you've put together around composing and creating original music in Dolby Atmos from the start. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So, at long last, many of you have been asking, well, Greg, really appreciate all the tips and tricks and all of that. That's really awesome. How do you work, on your own music? And I've been pretty coy about answering that, but I felt it was high time to kind of get into it. So what we're going to do over the course of the next couple of community sessions is we're actually going to build a song together. And I love to employ this idea of creating an Atmos first. So I do everything. I do everything in Atmos first. I derive my stereo mix from that. And moving forward, that's how I choose to work, because for me personally, as a musician, as a producer, as an engineer, the tools are in such a great place for that. And we're going to talk through a little bit. So today we're going to focus specifically on how I get started. So we're going to write from scratch. So I say we just jump right into it. Now, well, first thing I'll do is I'll give a little bit of the setup. So typically, if I'm in my studio, I've got all my stuff here. And today I'm going to be employing, obviously, Pro Tools with the internal rendering available. My MIDI controller, which the one I'm going to be using is an 88 key Control S88 from Native Instruments. But when I'm on the road, I'm using my laptop. I'm using something like my little Complete Control MIDI controller and a pair of headphones. Usually, what I've been using as my daily driver have been the Odyssey Maxwells, and these work great. But today we're in the studio, but we're gonna use Pro Tools. And I'll just quickly pull up a little shot here of these are the DAWs that currently have low latency availability enabled in the DAW with internal rendering. So we've got Logic Pro down to 32 samples, Avid Pro Tools. If you're working natively, you can get down to 32 samples. I'm actually in 32 samples. I'm working natively right now. If you use HDX, you can get to 64 samples, which is still pretty low, and Blackmagic Resolve and Presonus Studio One down to 32 samples. So again, internal rendering with those DAWs. Make sure you're on the latest versions to make sure that you're enabled. And here we are in Pro Tools. The first thing I'll quickly talk through is just the idea of setting up a template. When you want to create, you want to be able to get in and get going quickly. Dolby Atmos is not meant to be something that restricts you from being in your workflow. It really allows you to do what you need to do. So for me, it's an extra layer, and now being able to have it from the get-go is really great. So I do my recording and monitoring in low latency, and I'll even show you here. If I go to my playback engine, you'll see here that we are down to 32 samples. Now, as soon as I click OK, we'll get a pop-up that comes up that says binaural processing has been disabled because it's a minimum of 512 is required. So we're not working binaurally right now, but if you were, that is something you'll need to consider if you want to work binaurally. So here's my template. You can see I've got a couple of folders set up. These are just basic folders. These are not routing folders. And I'll just quickly go through them. And I'll start with the bottom one, which is a pretty easy one. This is where all my master outputs are. Right now, I'm only using the one that just goes to the renderer out. So I've just got that there. But if I had other outputs that I wanted to monitor, I can set them up and have them in that nice, neat folder. And if we go in the top, I have a folder that I call Essentials. And this is going to be my click track. I always have a signal test. You can see that signal test is right now inactive. But if I needed to check to make sure my speaker routing is all correct wherever I am, I have that patched through, and I can check stuff in the bed. I can check stuff in objects if I assign it to that, and just make sure everything is nice and clean. So that's inactive. And of course, I've got my LFE bus. And of course, you can see there that we've got a high pass filter, low pass filter at 20 hertz and 120 hertz. And this is being sent specifically to the bed directly to the LFE, right? Really, really, really simple. Then we've got beds and objects, a bed and an object. So typically what I do, I always usually start a session with 4 tracks of audio, stereo audio, 4 tracks of instrument tracks, so where I host virtual instruments. And you can see here, I've already got a couple of things here in the bed. I've got the Groove Cell drum machine. I've got Play Cell. I've got a couple of Play Cells where we're going to do bass and some keys. By the way, we're going deep house today. We're going to build this from scratch. And then I'll show you how we've got the object set up here in just a second. So the thing about it is we can just get in right away and start creating. So I'm going to go ahead here and we're going to start with a groove cell. And we're going to stay at 120 BPM. Originally, I was going to do this banging like techno thing because I was in the mood for it. And then I realized it's a wide audience. Let's do something a little bit more chill so everybody can kind of be into it. So we've got my keyboard ready to go, my MIDI control ready to go. And I'm just going to go ahead and start recording. Now, you'll also see that everything under my bed folder is already assigned to the bed outputs, okay? So not much I need to do there. Again, we're concentrating on creating, monitoring, and recording. We're not worried about mixing right now. We'll do that another time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and record some drums, and we'll just keep adding. We'll just loop it around, and we'll add some additional pieces to it. Here we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and quantize that automatically. All right. Let's start adding some other pieces. We'll keep it simple. Leave that, come out of record. So we've got a pretty simple groove. We're going to leave that as right there in the bed. Let's go ahead and continue creating. So I figure we'll add some keys to this. We'll do kind of a little FM Tine or Rhodes kind of thing. And for that, we're going to use Play Cell. So I'm just going to go ahead and record. And again, everything that we're doing right now lives in the bed. So if I actually pull up the renderer window and play back a little bit here, you'll see that. So there we are in the bed. So I'm going to go ahead and push that to the side. And let's go ahead and record some keys. We'll wait for it to come back around. All right, I like how that sounds. Let's go ahead and just keep going, and let's add a bass. We'll add the Play Cell bass to that. Yeah, start there. Go ahead and record. Just make sure I can miss one note. All right, we've got that. We're going to quantize that as well. Now check it out. All that information lives in the bed, as you can see here again on the in the renderer, right? Let's go ahead and we can actually start mixing that a little bit. But again, we're not going to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead now and go straight over to our objects. And typically for me, when I think about objects, I start thinking about things that are going to be a little bit more elevated. Things are a little bit more ethereal, perhaps. Certainly in the case of what I'm doing here, I think that might be the case. So you can already see that, again, the same way I have my beds laid out, I have a very similar layout for my objects. And I already have things already assigned to objects you can see here. So I have 4 instrument tracks and 4 audio tracks, just like I did in my bed. Now, I may not use them. Some of these may end up going to the beds, and beds may end up going into objects. Doesn't really matter. Again, the whole idea is to have a template set up where I can quickly kind of create. So I know that right now I'm going to do a little string pad on expand, and I already have that assigned to an object. But I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and move that a little bit up in the heights. Let's go ahead and link those. So we'll put them up in the heights, and we'll go somewhere in the mid section a little bit. So now if I go ahead and pull up the renderer, you can see that's where my string is. Let's go ahead and push it a little bit more, more around there and a little bit higher. Now check this out. This is something that I really like doing, and I think you should probably follow suit. Is for me, session etiquette is really important. You can see here that in the internal renderer here in Pro Tools, I'm showing the path name. So if I want to go ahead and make sure that as I'm watching objects appear here in the renderer, I can simply kind of just go in here, right click on the object, and I can rename it. So I'm going to call this string pad. And now, whenever that object pops up, I'll actually have the path name, the name that I've renamed. So you can rename your objects basically. So let's go ahead and record a string pad. Great, that's good for now. Next up, we're going to do one of my favorite things, which is to build an arpeggio. I love arpeggios. They're a really super cool, fun way to get musical. I typically tend to write them as I record. What we're going to do right now is we're going to use SynthCell, which I have up here. Really great synth built into Pro Tools. We're only using stock plugins for this song. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use step input to enter some notes. And let's go ahead and make sure that we're in mono mode. So we're only going to do monophonic, one note at a time. And to enter those notes, I'm going to go ahead and use the event operations. We're going to do step input, and we want to make sure that's enabled and make sure you're on the right track. So we are on SynthCell Arpeggio, and I am looking for 16th notes. And let's set the velocities all to 100, good even place. And let's go ahead and enter some notes. Okay, something like that. And let's go ahead and actually get out of there. And let's hear back what we've got, which is going to sound pretty raw. So pretty raw. Obviously, it's not a great sound, but let's go ahead and build something really quickly. And there's something I really want to kind of point out, which is this idea of being able to work with your effects in an immersive environment. There are really two types of effects when it comes to that. Stuff that you want to be able to glue things together. Usually that's done in the bed. There are many different schools of thoughts. And then there's those effects that I consider to be a part of the architecture of the sound. So we're going to create a sound right now. And let me go ahead and first pull up the panner for that, and we'll just go ahead and start moving this around a little bit. Let's go ahead and let's see, pull them more to the back, and then we'll start. Let's just do that for now, and then we'll start. So we'll start up and behind the listener a little bit. So let's go ahead and build a sound, and we'll add some effects that will travel with this because we're going to automate this. So let's see. First, let's go ahead and make a better sound because we're just using this just straight up saw wave. And we'll keep that. We'll add a little bit of pulse. We'll add another saw wave, but let's go ahead and detune that. Already getting a little thicker. Let's add some resonance. I can play with that. All right, a little bit more resonance. And then what we want is this sound to be a little bit shorter in terms of how it plays out. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and cut this piece off here. Don't want that. All right, so we're just going to work with this. And to do that, we're going to use the sustain right here on the amp envelope. There we go. That's what we're looking for. But we want a little bit more out of that. So we're going to go to the effects page. We're going to have some effects that will travel with it. So already I can see there's a hall reverb, but not too much. We'll do a little bit of that. And then we definitely want delay. Right, so now we've got notes folding over on top of each other in a really nice musical way, right? So let's go ahead and let's loop that. So we've got that copied over a little bit. Let's bring that in just a little bit. And guess what? Now we've got something that we can actually go in and we can actually, if I wanted it to do some movement in terms of in the space, I can actually do that. So just to make sure, just so you see, I'm going to pull up the renderer again. And let's go ahead and rename this, of course. We want to make sure that we know, we'll just put ARP, right? So there's our arpeggio. And what we want to do, we want to have it move around a little bit. So that's object 13 and 14 stereo. Let's go ahead and pull up the panner for that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and record an automation. We're just going to use my mouse to do that. So to make sure we're doing that, I just need to put that track in the right mode, in the correct right mode, I should say. So we're just going to go here where it says read, and we're going to go to touch latch. Now, whatever I do, whatever I record on this pass, Pro Tools is going to record that. So I'm going to use my mouse, and let's just go ahead and just do some movement here. We'll do some simple stuff. First, we'll do heights. All right. Now, hands off, and you can see that automation is going. And I'm going to add some additional automation there. All right. Hands off again. I'm going to come out of record, and now we've got that automation. All right. Now, I'm going to put this out of the way for a second, and I'm just going to point out that if you want to correct any of that automation, you can quickly do so by just going into the pan lane, which is this little tool icon right here. You click that, and then you just want to go over to your pannings, and then we can say all automation lanes, and you can find the ones you want. If you needed to smooth those out, you can do that. So really, really simple, guys. It's not much else in terms of, when you're working and creating music, you're just adding a layer of starting to place things, whether it's in the bed or in objects. For me, having the automation of doing some of the panning also creates some really kind of nice creative moments where I might even write around that, if you will. So we're going to stop here. That's part one. And next time, we'll go a little bit further. We'll take some of this stuff. We'll turn it into audio like you saw me do earlier. We'll have it placed, and we'll talk a little bit about mixing. And then at the end, we'll talk about delivering and rendering your ADMs and then deriving your stereo mix from that. So I hope that was fun. And of course, we're also going to make the session available to everyone. So at the end of the series, so look out for that. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ben. And I guess I'll play myself out here.
That was awesome. In the studio with Greg Stryke Chin, creating original music in Dolby Atmos, using the panner and the arpeggiator as their own instruments, essentially, using the automation lanes to create, rhythmic variations. And that was awesome, Greg. So thank you. And I can hear like the beginnings of a little funky house tune getting going right there. So thank you for sharing that. If folks have questions, please drop them into the questions function here in Big Marker. And with that, let's jump into it. Thanks, Greg. Great stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Welcoming back my guests for Q&A. Thank you, everybody, for the great questions submitted during the session. We answered some directly back already, and we'll roll through some here. Starting with Paul's question, with the integration of Atmos into DAWs like Logic and Pro Tools, I'm looking to expand coverage in my surround sound lecture from the traditional 5.1 and 7.1 to include Dolby Atmos. Do you run any educational programs in the UK to help get this up and running? Great question, Paul. Thank you. I'd encourage you to visit the Dolby Institute site at dolby.com/institute to take a look at the Music Essentials course there. You can also reach out directly to the great folks at Dolby Institute. Institute, of course, is there to help educate and inspire and empower the next generation of music creatives, and they oversee all of our educational partnerships. So scroll to the bottom of the page and connect directly with the Institute team there. Next question is from Henny. When checking the final mix and negative 18 LUFS is the target, why is there a huge difference in the loudness of an Atmos track on the streaming services? We'll kick that one to you, Matt and Robin.
I'm going to assume that it depends on where you're listening. Like if you're listening on an iOS device and you don't have sound check on, you're probably, if we're talking about stereo versus Atmos, that's one aspect of why there could be that. But also maybe in the dynamics of the track itself, if you have a loud rock track that's just compressed and easily can sit on the shelf, so to speak, versus an acoustic track that's got a lot of dynamic range and a lot of potential to be loud. I don't know, Robin, is that your experience, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the same way, like especially if you're comparing like the soft section to the Atmos to the stereo, it might be a bit lower. But I know in general, like all the streaming services like Apple, they're all like trying, like they're paying close attention, because I know there have been many talks about like which is louder. So I know there's a lot of changes happening all the time, and I'm sure that all the platforms, their goal is to match it as close as possible. That's why also timing wise, everything has to be delivered exact. So I know the goal is to match it loudness wise, and I'm sure we get closer and closer as time goes by.
Great, thank you. And we did get a comment from Henny here in real time saying, Henny here, I listen in my 714 studio. So there you go. Question from Daniel, and it is, what are the best Dolby Atmos mixes you have come in contact with recently and are worth recommending? Daniel, I'd encourage you to check out Dolby's Instagram page on Fridays for stories highlighting new releases. You can also check out Dolby's YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify actually for Dolby Creator Talks, which are now featuring album-focused discussions with episodes featuring music mix engineers. So hopefully you dig that, and you can find some things that you find interesting on both of those channels. Question from Nathan for you, Robin, and for Matt as well. What are some of the ways that you counter adjust for Atmos spatial mixes? I would also love to hear about your mastering process using the built-in Pro Tools renderer.
Matt, do you want to start or?
Sure. Look, in regards to the Apple thing, that's a moving target. That's an algorithm that changes all the time. So I mix to the speakers. I make sure the binaural sounds as good as I want it to sound. And then honestly, I kind of hope for the best from Apple. Like I will listen, I will check it, but I will not make a mix decision based on what I hear. I'll just accept it for what it is, because that algorithm could change. And then 2 weeks from now, that mix would be completely, different sounding. So I don't think it's worth that, worth checking at this moment until things, I don't know if they're going to settle down or not. As far as mastering, I actually don't use Pro Tools to master per se. I mean, I make the mix, I export the ADM.
The passion of our loyal fans. Our team at Nakamichi seeks to redefine the boundaries of home audio. Advancing.
There we go. well, bonus ad for Nakamichi there for
I think that was me. Sorry, guys.
So as I was saying about Nakamichi, no, I'm kidding. No, so I'll mix. I mix. I take the ADM, I dump it into the album assembler from Dolby, and then get my levels and deliver that way. So I'm kind of essentially mastering as I'm mixing, I guess you could say. Robin, what's your experience?
I think very similar than yours with regards to the first part. 100%. I also don't rely too much on the MP4 and how the iOS devices translate, especially since each version, each update, it's going to sound different. So I'm still a bit like hesitant about relying too much on it. I also rely like 85%, I would say, on the speakers, and the other 15 on just the binaural version, and a check as well with MP4. On the mastering side, yes, I obviously compare a lot in my session. I have it so I compare to the stereo, so I make sure that kind of density wise I am where I want to be, because sometimes you want it to sound more open than the stereo, sometimes you want it to have that same kind of density, so then you adjust for it. But I also try to do it in one session, so to not have, and then I also put it in the assembler, time align it, and yeah, that's typically my process.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Greg, a couple for you. I'm not sure how much you have on this, but from Valerie, is ambisonic order in the picture for Atmos? And if so, what is the current standard for it?
So we really can't talk about, thanks, Valerie. We really can't talk about, roadmap and what features are coming. But in terms of ambisonics, so currently today, we can do live and file-based re-renders in AmbiX, which is a B format. That's what's available today. And if that's something you're looking to, work more in terms of having ambisonics or certain levels of ambisonics available to you while you're working in Atmos, let us know what that workflow looks like. We'd love to hear from you. But that's what's available today.
Cool, thanks. Another one for you, Greg, from Douglas. This is about room setup. If I want to upgrade my 712 with an extra pair of speakers, should I go 714 or 912? I think I'd prefer the extra horizontal plane to the extra height plane.
Yeah, I would say, never don't ignore your heights. It's a great question. a lot of this really depends on the size of your room, your budget, and there are other considerations. Certainly, our best practices guide kind of walks through that, which we can share with you. You can find it on the Dolby site. Now, of course, the minimum recommendation for a Dolby Atmos music room is 7.1.4. So we were talking about speaker layouts in the green room earlier, and how it's very attractive to have all of the sides available to you, but you want to make sure that you've got a good balance between everything that's air level, of course, your LFE, your subwoofer, and what's going on in your heights. So the minimum requirement is a 7.1.4.
Great. Thank you. Question from Rob. How does one become a certified service partner? And maybe I could ask Nikita or Greg to just drop the link into the chat function here for everybody to see. But we have a dedicated page for Certified Service Partner program, folks that are interested in becoming a part of that program. We also did a dedicated session on last month's music community sessions about that program, but there's a set of criteria that you'll walk through. There's some qualifications and of course some training that happens out in the field to enable you to go ahead and service the studios out in the world and commission them. So if you're interested in that, please do encourage you to take a look at this link and get you on your way. For Robin and Matt, question from Charles. Did you work with an acoustician to design and implement the treatment of your Atmos rooms?
You want to start, Robin?
Sure, I can start. No, I did this one actually myself. Fortunately, I've built already quite a few studios in my lifetime, about 10. So no, I didn't use a separate acoustician. I worked closely with Dolby, with PMC. Maurice at PMC helped to design the room. But no, I didn't use an external acoustician.
And I didn't either. This is a spare bedroom in our house that I think was an addition at some point. And so ironically, the walls are not parallel. I don't know why, but it worked out for the best. And so I just did the acoustic treatment myself. And then Jonathan Lessner from Dolby came and we tuned the room for Atmos, and it's great. I love it.
Great. Wonderful. Greg, over to you for one about software updates and operating systems from Joe. Traditionally in professional studios for reliability, we don't tend to keep software up to date with the latest versions, certainly not the OS on the machine. Where Atmos is concerned, is there any fundamental hindrance to staying at one specific OS X, like 12.5.1, for example, which has less spatial ability than 14.x?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to Dolby Atmos, I think automatically many of us tend to overthink things. So in terms of this, the reason I say that is the rules are pretty much the same. Which are basically the rules that you have created for yourself. It's really all about the iteration of the tools. So and then pairing that up with the OS. So obviously you want to make sure that the tools, whether it's your DAW, whether it's the renderer, the album assembler, whatever it might be, are all supported by that operating system. Now, if you have some level of iteration of those tools and OS that's working beautifully for you, and you're working professionally and you're working on projects, certainly that's probably not a great time to go and start upgrading or updating your software. However, as new features and new workflows are introduced, those things become certainly more enticing. You want to take a look at that. So always make sure that if you're looking to update your tools, that you've properly backed up your system, and that the new tool sets and workflows are going to be as you're moving towards. The other thing I'll quickly mention that I thought about as I was answering this is the idea for some of the tools to be able to have multiple versions of those tools on your system. This is same for Pro Tools, for the Dolby Atmos Renderer. You know what? And now you've just given me a thought that I will walk you through some tips and tricks on how to do that in an upcoming session. But for those tools in particular, you can actually have multiple versions on the same system to a limited amount. So certainly something to think about. But yeah, I mean, if you are working well and you're in the middle of a project, you probably want to complete the project before you even think about updating. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that. I actually have 4 different versions, the last 4 versions of Pro Tools on my system, named Pro Tools and then the dot, the dot version.
Right. Yep. As do I.
Right. And also, I also wanted to add is like I never trust developers. So I always check, like when I feel like even when Pro Tools introduced the internal renderer, I think it took me like 2.5 months until I was comfortable of like, yes, this is working how I think it should work. So I feel, especially with this, with like new technology and things happening, is like try to work on a system that you feel is good and that is stable and that you know how it operates. So I definitely also wouldn't recommend to update, too often. Like once you have something working, like use it for a while, and then of course update when there's new stuff. But I always triple check everything, because you never know. There's always something that can happen.
Awesome. Multiple versions and back it up, friends.
Yeah.
All right. A question about binaural with head tracking, and I'm trying to decipher Nicholas's question here. So Nicholas, hopefully I do so, and if not, please let me know. But for Robin and Matt, binaural depth and localization perception with head tracking. Does anybody use decorrelation or other techniques to enhance the experience?
Do you want to jump in, Robin?
Sure, I can start. I mean, I think decorrelation in general is part of the mix process when it comes, and especially when it comes to spatial audio. So I don't think it's something I would pay attention to, whether it's head tracking or no head tracking. I think head tracking is like a nice extra, but also it really depends on which some tools work well with the head tracking part works well, some don't. So I don't base too many decisions, especially when it comes to music mixing, on that. I try to make it sound good in the room first, and then of course I will see how it translates and optimize if needed. But I feel like decorrelation and that's part of the technique of mixing immersive in general. So I wouldn't do anything specifically for head tracking.
And I would 100% agree with everything you just said. And just to add to that, to say that there's all these external factors that kind of come and go. Like I mentioned earlier about the Apple spatial algorithm changing over time. That's out of our control. The head tracking could change. All of these external things that are bonuses, since they change, I don't make mixed decisions based on those. But as I say, they're an extra interesting thing when you do head tracking and you're like, oh, looking around your mix kind of thing. And it's like, oh, that's nice, but I wouldn't make a mixed decision on that.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Moving on to a question from Guilio. Are you using the center channel for vocals? This will be for Robin and Matt. I'm working in film and television production and would love to hear music with actual center channel, not only phantom center. So there's that. And then 2, are you recording the channel stereo to get a dedicated center channel for strings and other larger instrument groups? Best practices on center channel, guys.
Okay. I can start if
yeah, go Robin.
I mean, personally, I love using the center channel. I think it's a very important. It helps as an anchor in a lot of the mixes. So I do love using it. I personally use my own plugin a lot to extract the center information, because when you're mixing from stems, for example, a lot of times the stems come in stereo. So I use center one to take out whatever is happening in the center, and I will either use that to then maybe add a delay or a reverb, or use that dry, depending on what I'm looking for in the vocal. And I will typically blend that in with the stereo. So I personally do love using the center for different things, sometimes vocals, sometimes other things. In orchestral music, the orchestral mixes I've done too, I love using it with the Decca tree, for example. Like it's already there. So I definitely have played with that and try to find the right balance. But again, it depends what the music is asking for. But for me, the center channel is an important part of the immersive mix.
I think I traditionally haven't. And in some cases where film and TV are involved, I think that maybe, and this could come from a lack of knowledge of that world. So excuse me if this sounds incorrect, but seeing that there's a lot of center channel activity in a film or something like that, where dialogue is there, I would tend to, naturally want to avoid that. But coming from a music background, 100%, I typically don't use the center channel very much. I use it very sparingly. However, listening to Robin talk about his plugin now, I'm like totally thinking, maybe I better rethink that. So it's always a work in progress. There's no like hard, fast rules.
But I do wanted to add, because somebody just asked in the chat as well, like, how do you account for the Apple Music Center channel deficit? I'm very careful. Like, I make sure that my center channel is not louder than the stereo, because then sometimes, because of level jumps, it could be too loud, or depending on the algorithm. So I am careful not to overuse the center channel compared to the stereo, but I personally love using it. So yeah,
that's a good point.
Cool. All right, we'll roll through a couple of more and then we'll wrap here, folks. From Paolo, Greg, 514 setups in small rooms. What's your opinion?
So yeah, thanks, Paolo. My opinion is 7.1.4 is the minimum. Now, again, we smaller rooms, we do have some tolerances. So make sure you check out the best practices guide for that.
Cool. Thank you. For Robin and Matt from Sanjay, can you name some plugins or hardware that you use to mix in Atmos?
Oh, I'll jump in if you don't mind, Robin. Number one, my monitor controller, Grace M908. I know that there's other solutions out there, but for me, this has just been bulletproof and has allowed me to just mix and not have a problem piece of gear that holds me up in any way. And then from a plugin perspective, I actually use a lot of the plugins I would use in a stereo mix in Atmos, and just try them in new creative ways, like multi-mono versions of plugins to experiment with. I think I have one particular reverb that I use, the HD cart. I've just started using in multi-channel versions, but typically I like just using stereo stuff and putting it in specific places. But Robin, what's your experience?
Yes, for me on the plugin side, there's a couple of things that I really like. For example, the PSP Oral Comp that was co-developed by Ronald Prent.
That's fantastic.
Excellent compressor and the way to link channels. But in general, yeah, I use a lot of the same tools that I use for stereo. For reverbs, like I have more 7.1 reverbs, or even like fully immersive reverbs like Symphony. I still like using a lot of times Altiverb in 5.1, but then I upmix that later. Yeah, so I think I would say more than 80% of the plugins I would use are the ones I also use in stereo. And there's a couple of things that I would use specifically.
And I want to give another shout out to PSP, because that Oral Comp is really great, and it sits on my bus, on my I have a 916 bus that I use in the way I mix, so it always sits there.
Awesome. Cool. All right, and the last one for you, Greg, a topic near and dear to your heart from Joanne. How do I automate panning in the Dolby Atmos renderer internally in Pro Tools?
Same way, yeah, thanks. Same way you would do it using the external renderer. Now, if you're talking about the music panner in particular, someone had asked me also here in the chat, and I answered that there were a few sessions ago. I did a walkthrough of using the Dolby Atmos music panner and being able to do all the cool sequencing and stuff that you can do there, and copying that automation to copy it and paste it onto the internal Pro Tools panner or Logic panner or whatever else, what other immersive panner, depending on your DAW. But basically, if you're in DAW and you're using the panner in that DAW, the same way you would automate, if you've got a control surface and you're able to kind of latch onto the plugin and have the encoders available to you there, do that. If you're using your mouse, like you just saw in the session that I did on the tips and tricks, using your mouse and having your plugin up and doing touch latch that works perfectly as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. With that, we'll come to a close here. Matt Boudreau, Robin Reumers, Greg Stryke Chin, thank you guys so much for your time and expertise on this session. Thank you to all of our attendees for the amazing questions, and we will see you next time.